AI in Action is brought to you by Alldus International, covering your business's staffing, consulting, and networking needs. Our host brings you the leading minds in AI, sharing their story, their success, and their advice. Focusing on fast-tracking you to the top, AI in Action cuts through the hype to help you kickstart your data science career. To listen to the latest AI in Action podcast, head over to www.alldus.com/podcast or subscribe via iTunes, Stitcher, or Google Podcasts.
Hello and welcome to another cybersecurity episode of the AI in Action podcast. I am your host, John Petherbridge. In today's episode, I'm speaking with Vanessa Pegueros, the Chief Information Security Officer at Onelogin. This conversation covers a lot of ground, and Vanessa breaks down the value of management versus leadership, ownership and influence, as well as the importance of having your security leader report to the top level of the organization. Enjoy the show.
My name is Vanessa Pegueros, and I have been in cybersecurity for 18 years. I have worked in large companies, over 200,000 people, to companies of 300 people. I've worked within the telecommunications industry, the banking industry, software as a service industry, hospitality, e-com industry. So I have a broad breadth of experience both in the different verticals as well as different size companies. And I first went into security in a wireless company, AT&T Wireless. And I always tell the story that I didn't actually choose security. Security chose me. And when I was working at AT&T Wireless, I was in charge of a large engineering and architecture team looking at advanced wireless technologies. At the same time, there was a new head of security at AT&T Wireless, and she conducted an outside red team exercise where a third party would come in and test to see how much they could essentially hack into the environment. Well, they were able to hack into pretty much everything. Now, of course, this was decades ago almost, and back in 2002. So they were able to get into everything, including some detailed customer databases. So I was the executive vice president who was in charge of the entire AT&T Wireless nationwide network in the U.S. Basically pulled one of his VPs in and said, I need you to go dedicated director to fix security. So I got pulled into the office by that VP, and he's like, guess what? You're going to go fix security. And I was like, had no idea what that actually meant. But I basically said, okay. And that's how I got into security. And I guess the big lesson for me career-wise is you never know when an unexpected door is going to open, and really think about it before you turn it down, or you feel like, well, I don't know anything about that, I can't do that, because I really didn't know much about security, but I said, okay, it sounds fun, and I decided to do it. And I've been 18 years later, it's been one of the best choices I've made from a career standpoint.
Wow, that really is a case of kind of falling into it and kind of feeling the fear and doing it anyway. Obviously, so you mentioned you have your background is quite technical, and you've led engineering teams, and technology is not something that scared you. Your career has clearly obviously progressed in the last 18 years, and you've held the role of Ciso across a number of different industries since then. At what point did you feel you wanted to transition into, I suppose, more leadership focused, as opposed to being kind of hands-on technical or even driving engineering teams?
Yeah, so actually that too was a little bit influenced by one of my first supervisors out of college. I hired on as an engineer, and I was doing hands-on engineering work. And he, for whatever reason, he was an older guy at the time. I mean, I'm just out of college, probably like 22, and he was probably at that time 45, 46, could have been late 40s. And he said, he goes, he just saw something in me. He says, I really think you're you'd be good managing people and technical people. And so he gave me an administrative assistant to manage. I think she knew more than me about managing people than I did at the time, but she was really I learned a lot from her, and I learned a lot about just my own, like, I think sometimes people see things in you that you don't always see right away. And what I did learn is I did really like leading teams, managing people. Managing is different than leading, though. So managing to me is more about, you get a set of work and you have to go get your team to go accomplish that work. Where I feel like leadership is inspiring people to figure out what their work is. You give them the very high level goal, and then you let them, give them the freedom and flexibility to go accomplish that goal, and inspire them, and equip them with resources, which is leadership. So early on, I adopted, like, oh, I'm interested in management. But it wasn't until probably maybe like 8 to 10 years into my career where I actually, decided, and I say decided because I think leadership is a very intentional thing. For me, my approach to leadership is one of a lot of responsibility for the people in your team, responsibility to helping them achieve success, and you really impact them at a human level, their lives, their livelihood. And so for me, just the concept of leadership was taking on a responsibility similar to like a family. And
Okay.
so that was not, it was a very intentional decision for me. But I did decide I wanted to do this.
Yeah, so I guess just looking at your profile here as well, and like what you explained, so about the last 11 years or so, correct me if I'm wrong, it's been predominantly in a Ciso capacity. Um,
Hmm. Yes.
so that has been across the hospitality, banking, and software as a service side of things. So
Hmm.
you've seen a lot. Like, what are the kind of key challenges or core challenges that you face when you take on a role as a CISO, or what have you identified that may even cross over from various industries?
Yeah, so one of the biggest challenges in the role of a CISO is where some jobs you own a particular part of the infrastructure. You own a server, you own applications, you as an engineer, you control, run those things. Whereas when you're in a security and CISO role, you don't directly control what those owners are doing with those systems or applications. So your role is one of influence, and uh, persuading people to do the right thing and to follow policies and guidelines. And that's a very difficult thing to do, especially if you're, I mean, I don't believe technical people always have the best skill sets in the areas of influence and and kind of persuading people.
Yeah.
They tend to be more like, this is the way it needs to be, you got to do it this way. And it's more of a binary kind of right or wrong situation, and you have to do it the right way, or otherwise it's wrong. And
Mm.
so that doesn't a lot of times security teams, their role is one of influence. Obviously they have some security tools, they control themselves, but that's not usually where the problems are. The problems are getting other areas of the business or other technical owners to do the patching, or do the configure the systems properly, or follow the policies around access control. So that's probably in my mind one of the most challenging parts of security. The other challenging part is the threat environment is constantly changing, and that puts you in a very uncertain situation on almost daily basis of what new malware is going to be developed, what new techniques are going to be used. And the other challenge is that these hacker tools are being more commoditized, so anybody can get them. It used to be you had to be a good hacker, you develop your own tools, and that skill set, you're smart, you know how to do that. You figure out weaknesses, you develop tool sets around that to exploit the weaknesses. In today's environment, a lot of those tools can be purchased on the dark web and are commoditized, and you don't need to know how to craft a tool. You just need to know what you want to do. If you want to rent a botnet and execute a DDoS on somebody, you can do that. And you just have to have money, and you just have to go out there and buy it. So it's really gonna make the threat environment even worse, because now anybody can be a hacker, and you don't have to really know a lot to do that. So I think the threat environment, and then the complexity and managing that complexity internally of an enterprise or a company, because it is now, a lot of companies are moving to cloud and SaaS-based services. So the complexity is increasing. So you're trying to influence an increasingly complex environment, and you're also, trying to defend against a growing adversary, or an adversary that could be anybody, could be anywhere. So those those two factors make it very challenging.
Yeah, and definitely. That is quite interesting to kind of to put it that way, and because the landscape is changing and evolving so often and so frequently. Um, how do you and CISOs in like your network that you're aware of, how do you proactively kind of stay ahead of the curve to ensure that your your business is kept safe?
I'm not sure I'm not sure we are staying ahead of the curve. I think we're doing the best we can. I think I have a strong principle in a strong belief that one of the best ways to at least be a fast follower, or not fall too far behind, is to actually have the best visibility into your environment you possibly can. When I
Okay.
mean visibility, I mean security visibility. Have that ability to see what's going on, and then to decipher whether that activity is good or bad, and then to be able to respond to it. Obviously, you want to put good protections in where you can, but that isn't, things are just happening too quickly in the enterprise, and you can't, unfortunately, today stay up with everything as it changes. So the best you can do is catch it. And again, I'm not saying don't work toward preventive measures, but I know that that's a never ending. You've got not just you've got people in your company who may be doing things that they inadvertently cause problems. It's mistakes, it's human error. I mean, those things hurt you as much as a hacker sometimes. In terms of whether it was intentional or not, it still could be very bad press for the company. It could cause a lot of customer challenges and notifications if someone accidentally leaks information, not intentionally. So there's
Yeah.
that having that visibility is, to me, the number one thing you can do.
Yeah, I guess who has access to what and at what times, and when the crown jewel could be accessed or exposed, and who's the right person that's overlooking that. Yeah,
Also, I would say most companies don't do a very good job of controlling access. So how making sure that each of your employees has only the access they need. It's a fundamental principle in security, but we don't, in practice, don't do it very well. Principle of least privilege. We don't do that well. We tend to give too many people too much access to data they don't really need, and it's because it's easier. It's harder to define roles and limit access, and there's this political aspect of where people feel they need access to data when they really don't, but they want the access to the data. To me, access to data is power in the modern company, and so people don't want to have their power limited by having reduced access to data. And so this is a challenge that the security teams are constantly dealing with. But controlling access to the data is one of the best preventive measures that you can do, but it's also very challenging.
Definitely, and obviously a way to impact the business's culture and to bring out the more of a cybersecurity and risk awareness. It has to come from the top, right?
Oh yes, definitely. I mean, the companies where I've worked in, and where I feel that security, the CEO has talked about security, and the the and this is where we get into the conversation of where does the security leader report in the organization, and I think having that tone from the top and setting the culture and the values of the company has to come from the top around security. And how will the CEO make the decision of, choosing security over potentially creating a more, like, maybe might be perceived as less flexible culture internally, because maybe the CEO is saying, look, we are going to do a very strict access control structure in this company, and you all are not going to get access to every bit of data you might want to have. There will be an exception process, and we'll figure out how to, work it if you absolutely need it. But that kind of communication coming from the top goes a long way. And then the other aspect of it, which is, I believe that any company that truly cares about security, security is already a hot topic in boardrooms. As you know, John, I've sat on boards, and I've obviously presented to boards, being the Ciso, and the conversation of security is coming into the boardroom more and more. It's a top level conversation, and if for a company that has that kind of, where they feel it's important enough, or the board is talking about it, you have to have the security leader reporting to the highest level of the organization. And my fundamental belief, and I currently at OneLogin report to the CEO, I believe that security leaders, for companies that think security is a priority and really mean it, I think that the security leader needs to report to the CEO. Now, they might not be called a CISO, they might have a different title, but they lead security and they're accountable for security. And it's not the same when if you have the security leader reporting to like a CIO or a CTO, that's not the same. You need them independent from so the security leader should not have any operational responsibilities other than managing their own security tools. And that gives them the independence to be transparent and talk about the security risks. When you're reporting to a boss, let's say a CIO, who also owns servers and operational elements that actually have vulnerabilities and represent risk, and you have the CISO reporting into that CIO, what kind of position does that put that CISO in when they have to go to the board and they have to tell the board that there are all these risks that their boss has not fixed? How is that that is a political nightmare for the CISO. And it's also, the CIO is not going to appreciate that he or she is being told that somebody who works for that individual is telling the board what they're not doing. So it really it undermines. It's a conflict of interest for the CISO, and it really kind of you don't have a separation of duties. You have, and I've had situations where my colleagues of mine have told me that they prepared, information to go to the board, and then their boss, who happened to be a CIO, basically modified that information because he didn't want that information to be shared with the board because it made him look bad. So this is why companies are having these really bad problems with breaches, and not they have security as a function in the leadership buried too far down in the organization, and they have people who don't want the bad things to be brought up to the board or the CEO. So that's why you have to pull this function away from any leadership that owns other operational elements of the company.
Yeah, that's such a good point. It seems there's a bit of a sweeping it under the carpet for the presentation to the board when it comes to topics that are part of your jobs to CISO to fix and to mitigate and to have to make business sense. What would you say to CISOs that are looking to get that buy-in at CEO level? Like, what's the advantage to the CEO to having a second, third, or fourth person, wherever you may sit in the reporting line, but having another person report directly into them, because they may just be looking to have as few people as possible reported into them.
Yeah, very good point. I mean, I understand that a lot of CEOs, the optimal number of people reporting to, I think the max is somewhere around 8 people. So when you have more than that, it becomes really suboptimal. I personally like 5 to 6 people reporting to me. But it's a very real issue. But I also would say it just depends on how important the CEO believes security is. So, if you're a security company, so case of Onelogin or any other security company sells a security product or service, why would you not have the CISO reporting to you? The CISO not only represents the security of your internal company, but also they are a voice of the customer at the top. They utilize security tools and understand security technology, the stuff that you're selling. Like, why, to me, the advantage for a CEO at a security company is you're going to actually get the inside understanding of what all these buyers out there are experiencing, and the CISO is a great representation of that. It's like, they can tell you the perception, they can influence the market, and that's kind of what I do at Onelogin. I work with the product people, I work with marketing, I share with marketing what works with security buyers, what doesn't work with security. Again, my viewpoint, but 18 years of viewpoint. So I talk to my colleagues. I know what they complain to me about, and not in general, not about the company Onelogin, but just in general, the security space. They tell me. So like, you have this great, like, I call it voice of the customer there. And then you also have the ability to have your CISO take the products your company is introducing or thinking about introducing and trial them internally with your own security team. So like, this is, to me, it's a great benefit to have the CISO. Now, on the other side, the CISO needs to be business minded. They need to not just talk about technology. They need to understand the business and revenue and financial projections and marketing and what's involved in marketing. So the CISO has a role to become more educated on the business aspects. And I know some CISOs may not find that too interesting or don't want to do that. So to me, if you want to go and report to the CEO, you have to also become very versed on the business aspects. And so there's a requirement there. So,
I gotcha.
So for security companies, it's a no-brainer. And for me, I would question any security company that doesn't have the CISO reporting to the CEO. Now, for financial institutions and let's say insurance, some more highly regulated institutions, there is a chief risk officer who doesn't own any operational risk. So they don't. So to me, that is not a conflict, because they have created a structure where the security function report is in an organization that is independent from the other operational elements. So I think that's a fine structure to report into the chief risk officer. If you are an organization where your CTO is purely strategic and doesn't own any operational risk, that could be another structure that could work, reporting to the CTO. The structures that don't work, and it really is not a good solution, is reporting to the CIO or a CTO or a chief operating officer who has operational risk. So to me, that's the gauge. If the CEO looks at it, at his or her organization, and he or she sees that I have security reporting to a function that owns all these servers and owns all these applications, and they're buried in that organization, to me, that should be the bit of information they think about, not so much do I want them reporting to me, and then the idea is, how do you get them into a structure? Let's just say you just can't take on any more people, direct reports. Then you have to figure out, where can I move this individual in their function to give them that independence to be able to really, because if they want to see the information, they have to get them away from a boss that is going to potentially stop that information from coming to the CEO. So, but there are challenges. If you move them to the general counsel, the challenge with the general counsel is they don't always have they don't understand the complexities of technology. And so that becomes a little hard, depending on the general counsel, to explain the issues, because they obviously feel like, well, I need to understand this if I'm going to bring it to the CEO. Well, you can't just teach a general counsel. It's like trying to teach the Ciso law, in a short span of time. That's just, it's a profession, and there's a lot of work. There's a lot of knowledge there that just can't be transmitted easily. So every structure has its pluses and minuses, and I'm not, if for sure the CISO can't report to the CEO, you just need to figure out a place where they don't have a conflict of interest and there is some separation of duties.
So yeah, I think from someone of your experience and your background, you've seen the cybersecurity market evolve and grow, and it's gained a lot more publicity in ways of the skills gap is very, very well publicized, albeit the number changes from 2 million to 4 million, and depends on what week you're looking at the statistics of open vacancies around the world. From your experience or understanding of the market, what is the most crucial role for a business to hire for? I appreciate this is probably a bit of a tricky question, but if they were to make the biggest impact with a single hire around cybersecurity?
That really depends on the size of the company and where they're at. So let me give you an example. Also, what focus the company has. So if you've got a smaller company and they're focused on selling into the enterprise space, and let's say, when I say smaller, less than 100 employees, really, and then I would say, and let's just say they're focused in the enterprise space, and they're also like a software type based company where they have a high percentage of developers, let's say, in their company. Then the one hire I would make would be a very security skilled developer who could be put into the development organization to help them learn how to do secure coding, act as a kind of evangelist, or pushing the standards around secure code development and making sure that the product is secure. So that would be my one hire. If I'm looking at a smaller business that's focused on, maybe the consumer organization doesn't do as much, consumer market doesn't do as much development themselves, then I would hire a person who would focus on privacy compliance, because that's very important to the consumer. Privacy is important, and you have to have a leader who's going to help, kind of orchestrate that for the business. But that's on the smaller side. If you're a larger business focused in enterprise, I think it is very important to have a strong CISO leader that you pull in, and then they'll figure out how to, if they don't, let's just say for some reason they don't get any headcount, but they would at least know how to run governance, and they would know how to pull resources and put a program together that other areas of the business had to perform the activities, and then they would have more of a governance and oversight role to make sure those activities are happening. So they would task, the engineering teams, or they would task whatever, the IT team, or they would be able to kind of orchestrate a program. And I think that's an important, function to because you have more resources with a larger company, you're able to do that. So you need a leader, a stronger leader. When you're smaller, you don't have you don't have the room for a CISO. It's like you just need somebody who's going to go help the people doing the work do it right. So those are kind of what I would and I think privacy is becoming more and more important as well, as I mentioned, with consumers. At some point, I think it will be the same kind of, GDPR has kind of been a model for privacy, and I think in the US eventually we're going to have some kind of national privacy law. So but eventually consumers are waking up, and they're gonna start demanding more privacy.
Yeah, that is a really, really good answer. Very very informative. I think our followers and our network and community will take a lot from that. But yeah, Vanessa, look, that's it. Thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate you taking the time to have a chat and run through some of your experience and sharing your knowledge.
Yeah, thanks, John. It was very it's fun. It's fun to talk about this stuff. And
AI in Action is brought to you by Alldus International, covering your business's staffing, consulting, and networking needs. Alldus offer an exec search program. Alldus can help you discover how data science and AI can transform your company. With our unrivaled network of C-suite executives and senior AI professionals, we offer retained search services across the US and Europe. Get the Alldus advantage. Become a member of the Alldus community and enjoy some of the following: AI meetups. Once a month, our community gathers to listen to some of the leading experts in the world of data science and AI. Our speakers come from all over the world, including Dublin, Boston, and Frankfurt. We also have our AI mentors. Our experts will provide mentoring to Alldus members. And don't forget our AI in Action podcast. Each week we have guests from all over the world talking us through their education, career, and more. Become an Alldus member and get the Alldus advantage. For more information and to sign up for our newsletter, log on to www.alldus.com. That's www.alldus.com. Alldus International, empowering through AI.